The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Thursday, April 25th. Hope everybody is having a fantastic week. And yeah, it's hectic over here, I can tell you that. All right, today show will be a little shorter. I do have a hard stop at 4 p.m. East Coast time, so it won't quite go into that third hour. There will be days like this when I have to schedule stuff at 4 o'clock. Some of this is legacy before we switch to the new program. I'm hoping that as we get used to this new programming, I will not have any more meetings at 4 o'clock, and that everything will be in the morning, and we will be able to run these sessions as long as we want. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, no limitations. Although some of you are complaining the shows are too long, but tough. All right, let's see. We're going to jump into some news. I think the biggest news item right now in the United States, even though it doesn't necessarily appear in the headlines everywhere, are the ongoing protests all over campuses all over the U.S. Yesterday and this morning, yesterday in particular, there were demonstrations at Emory University in Atlanta and basically in probably 24 universities all around the country. University of Texas in Austin made news because there was a big demonstration there. The police were called out. The police basically arrested, I think, 62 people and put them in handcuffs, took them to jail. I think ultimately they were released and they weren't indicted, but they were released. But they were taking off campus. That has resulted in a number of different things that I think are of interest. One is why do you arrest protesters, right? Why are protesters arrested? And if you're arresting protesters because you don't like what they're saying, that's a clear violation of free speech. If the police are literally dragging people away because they're anti-Semitic, then that is clear violation of free speech. And if you look at what Greg Abbott, tweeted, Greg Abbott, for those of you who don't know, is the governor of Texas. And if you've seen videos of this, I mean, the police show up in basically military gear. It looks pretty scary, and start arresting demonstrators. Some of them are resisting arrest, so it gets a little violent. But this is what Greg Abbott says. Arrests being made right now and will continue until the crowd disperses. These protesters belong in jail. You might ask, why do they belong in jail? Anti-Semitism will not be tolerated in Texas, period. Students joining in hate-filled anti-Semitic protests at any public college or university in Texas should be expelled. You can't arrest people because they're anti-Semitic. That is a clear violation of the First Amendment. That is a clear violation, an anti-free speech. And sadly, I think the Greg Abbott believes that. You can arrest demonstrators if they threaten, if they harass. Certainly in places like Columbia University, that has been much of what they've been doing, threatening, harassing. You can certainly arrest protesters if they're being disruptive, if they're preventing classes from being held, they're preventing people from moving about campus, they are preventing people from going about their business. That is reason to arrest them, right? But and that is protecting free speech by rejecting people who want to force their opinion on others and who want to intimidate anybody who disagrees with them into silence, because that's what these people are doing. They're intimidating, they're harassing. So you're protecting the free speech of those who they're trying to intimidate. But you're not protecting free speech when you arrest them for being anti-Semites. That's a violation of free speech. So, you know, it's the fact that they, so the arrests are wanted because they're interfering with the functioning of campus, and they are, they're not dispersing when they're asked to be dispersed, and they are clearly intimidating the people around them and threatening and so on. I think there's a lot of confusion about free speech, and a lot of misapplication of the free speech principle. By the way, a private university like Columbia, by the way, in Columbia, what's going on is they're negotiating. The protesters, which have clearly, completely upended campus life, completely upended the flow of campus life, disrupted the education. Education in Columbia has gone online because they can't actually run classes offline in class because of these demonstrations. Complete disruption. So in Columbia, the president of the university set a deadline 2 days ago of midnight. That got pushed out into the morning. Then it got pushed out to 48 hours. And now it's like there's this indefinite negotiation between the president and the demonstrators about how many tents, how many people, what they can say, how much they can disrupt, what they can do. I mean, the weakness is truly pathetic. These people do not belong on campus. They are interfering with the university's educational mission. This is pretty straightforward. This is pretty simple stuff. So the president of the university is negotiating. Who knows how that's going to end? She's in this funny situation, though. It is kind of funny because on the one hand, what's his name? House Speaker Johnson went to the campus yesterday and demanded that she resign because she hasn't been tough enough on the demonstrators. I think he's actually right. I think that is good enough reason to have her resign. And called for a resignation, an immediate, bringing in the police, calling in the police, and getting these demonstrators out of there and returning Columbia to being an educational institution where students can actually learn. The Student Senate, comprised of about 100 people, faculty, students, I guess administrators. The Faculty Senate is about to censure the president of the university for being too tough on the demonstrators, in particular for last Saturday inviting the police onto campus to arrest and withdraw the demonstrators, which they did. They got rid of 100, and as a consequence of that, several hundred came, and then they just left them alone. So they didn't go all the way. So on the one hand, you've got a situation where the politicians and certain advocates are demanding the president be tough and get rid of these demonstrators. On the other hand, you've got a situation where you've got the Faculty Senate and much of the faculty themselves demanding that no, protests should go on, and it's the president of the university that should be fired for ever dreaming that these people should be arrested or restrained in any kind of way with their activism. This is where we are today in America, where you cannot stop people, I guess, from on a university campus from creating mayhem, destruction, and threatening and harassing, and again, not allowing classes to proceed. It doesn't get any worse than that. In my view, universities should have rules about behavior and even about certain elements of speech. You can't, for example, shouldn't be able to go into a class where people are speaking, where somebody's being taught, I don't know, chemistry, and start yelling and disrupting the class and preventing it from proceeding. And you could say, yeah, you got free speech. It's a public university, and therefore you have free speech. You have free speech gives you the ability to yell in the middle of a classroom and prevent the class from continuing. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Even though it's a, quote, public space, it has to be treated as if, at least at that level, as if it's an organization. It has rules and principles, and you can't disrupt what's going on. Even if that means silencing you in order to stop the disruption. That is not speech. That is action. That is preventing the class, the university, from doing the function for which it exists. But again, so much confusion, so much of the left is up in arms about, oh, people have a right to free speech, therefore can't touch them. And people on the right saying, arrest them, they're anti-Semites. We do not have hate speech laws in the United States. Thank the Constitution and the First Amendment, thanks to the founders. We do not have hate speech laws. You can express hate. The university should have rules around this, and that are consistent, right? If you are allowed to express hate against Jews, then at a university, then you should be allowed to express hate against, I don't know, short people, and allowed to express hate against anybody, no matter whether they're, quote, protected minority or not. So you need a consistency, but you cannot, even as speaking, you cannot disrupt. You cannot stop. So Abbott is wrong for the reasons he's doing what he's doing. And in a sense, him being wrong about it, his anti-free speech position is unbelievably dangerous. Unbelievably dangerous, in some ways more dangerous than what the protests are doing. Because if this is perceived as the justification for doing away with them, if this is perceived as the right approach to free speech, we need to get rid of anti-Semitic speech. That would be truly truly horrific, and who would be left? I mean, where do we get a protection of free speech? So Abbott needs to go to re-education class and study the First Amendment and what it actually says and what it actually means. Greg Abbott, not one of the good guys. Not one of the good guys in the big picture of things. I don't know where this ends. I don't know where this ends. The reality is that it looks like these protests are going to continue. I think the only way for them to end is for the police to get really tough. In a sense, zero tolerance. Declare that any kind of disruption, whether it's on campus, on the streets, will not be tolerated and shut it down immediately. I think that's the only way it can stop it. The challenge is this, and this came out at UT today. The challenge is, I talked about this yesterday, the professors support this. At least a certain percentage of them said UT today. Professors called for new demonstrations today to demonstrate what the police did yesterday, and in solidarity with the Palestinians and all the rest of it. By the way, GBNEWS called today, and I was on this morning. Those of you in the UK, maybe you can find it. If you stream GBNEWS, I'd appreciate if anybody found a link to it. If you could send it to me. But I was on GBNEWS today, this morning, at least this morning my time, afternoon London time, talking about the protests, and you could tell that the hosts of the show did not know what to do with me because I did not say what they expected me to say. They thought I would rile against the anti-Semitism of the protesters, and instead I railed against the curriculum that they're studying, the influence of their professors, the ideas that they have, and the whole educational establishment. I railed against not their statements, but then I railed against them, not just for the anti-Semitism, but also for the very fact that they are supporting evil, that Hamas is evil, that they're not protesting, the girls in Iran, they're not protesting the civil war in Syria, they're not protesting the imprisonment of an atheist in Saudi Arabia. What they're interested in is hatred of Israel, hatred of Western civilization, hatred of success and prosperity, and their professors are at fault. I don't think they expected any of that. I don't think they expected me to call basically the Arab world evil regimes. I think they were a little surprised. Anyway, we'll see if they ever invite me back. That will be interesting. All right. That is my update on the protests on campus. This is going to be a story, I think, a continuing story as we move forward. All right, since we're talking about Israel, it does seem like Israel is finally getting ready to go into Rafah, which is in the south of the Gaza Strip. It's the one heavily populated area that Israel has not yet occupied, although there are other vast areas of Gaza that Israel has not entered yet. I'm not sure exactly what the operational reasons are, but they haven't. So it does look like they are getting ready to go into Gaza. But before they do that, they are getting ready for the evacuation of the civilian population. What other army in the world do you know that evacuates civilians before it goes in for war? It's just nuts. Anyway, so they bought a lot of tents. They're building tent cities in other areas in the Gaza Strip with the idea of moving the civilian population out of Rafah. Sorry, not outside of Gaza, in the Gaza Strip. They're moving them from Rafah to these tent cities, evacuating the population before they enter. So it does look like there will be a ground operation at some point. I would expect once Passover is over, which is next week, they will start the civilian evacuation, and then within a week or two after that, they will go in. They will go in on the ground. The other thing that's happened in the last few days in the Gaza Strip is areas that Israel has left, like the northern Gaza Strip, including Gaza City, are infested again with Hamas fighters. So it's whatever's going on, Israel is clearly not finding all the tunnels, finding all the places where they are hiding, because as soon as Israel leaves an area, these fighters show up. And by the way, I don't call them terrorists. They're not terrorists. Hamas is a government. These are soldiers on behalf of a government. Now, they act to terrorize, but terrorism makes this too narrow of a conflict. This is a conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. It's a conflict between the Israeli government and the Palestinian government in Gaza, which is Hamas. So yesterday, there was massive shelling of positions of Hamas positions in the northern Gaza, in areas that supposedly are being cleared out of all Hamas fighters. So, you know, it's like the hospital, right? You remember the hospital that they went in, they cleared it out, they left, and then, you know, 2 months later, they had to go back in and they discovered hundreds of Hamas fighters in the hospital. So every time Israel leaves a spot, this is the difficulty in urban warfare, tunnel warfare, and given that Hamas fighters don't wear uniforms, they've been civilian, they merge into the civilian population very easily. This is the difficulty in fighting such a war and getting them. You know, this is where we are. It's much slower, much more difficult, and than I think even they expected, even the Israelis expected. And this is why they keep leaving and keep being surprised that they have to go back in. And what I'm surprised is their inability to identify all the tunnels. I mean, there has to be a technology that allows you to, from above ground, identify hollow areas below. But I guess maybe not. Maybe not. It is clearly a challenge. All right, so stay tuned for a major operation into the south of Gaza later, probably early May. Also, yesterday, Israel probably had its busiest day in southern Lebanon, attacking positions of Hezbollah. And again, it wouldn't be surprised if Israel ultimately has to enter into southern Lebanon with a ground operation, a significant ground operation. All right. Gail asks, who did the interview? I don't know who the interview was with. So, you know, given that they can't find the tunnels, God, it's impossible to complete this. There's always somebody hiding in there with a couple of rockets and with weapons, and they sneak up on you. Really, really, really difficult war to pull off. Talk about the Middle East. In Iran, something nobody pays attention to and nobody notices. Tumaj Salehi, I'm probably mispronouncing it, who's an Iranian rapper who was a vocal critic of the Iranian regime and a supporter of the Girls' Revolution, and posted his music regularly on social media, has been handed a death sentence on Wednesday on charges including, quote, corruption on earth. Salhi was arrested in October 2022 for speaking in support of the anti-government protests in the country, again, the Girls' Revolution. And in 2023, U.S. State Department spokesman said the rapper's arrest, quote, underscores just how much Iran's leadership fears its own people, particularly young people like Tumaj, at the same time as the U.S. State Department was negotiating with the Iranian regime about who knows what. God, I mean, what does it mean to condemn this when you're at the same time legitimizing the regime by negotiating with them? Salhi has 20 days to appeal the sentence, which he plans to do. That has not gone well for many others who've supported the Girls' Revolution. Many of them have been hung to their deaths, and Iran continues to prove and reassert and confirm the barbarity of its regime. Again, shocking is the fact that the world is silent. World is silent. The U.S. State Department might make a statement, but they don't care. And I'm not talking about we need to go to war over this. We need to go to war for other reasons. I'm talking about just moral condemnation. Serious moral condemnation. Where are the student protests at University of Texas about this? Like, he's a rapper. He's a young kid. He's the same age as those students. Where's the outrage among the rapping community in the United States? Where's the outrage among musicians all over the world? But where's the outrage among women who are being, for the last 2-3 weeks, are being increasingly harassed in Iran for, I don't know, not wearing exactly the right clothes? Where's the outrage about that? Where are the student protests around these things? And as long as they're not protesting this, then they have no moral legitimacy, zero, zilch. Put aside whatever you think of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, whatever your views on it, however complex you might think it is, and the two sides, all of that. If you're not willing to protest what's going on in Iran, on GBNEWS, she asked, well, isn't it okay to protest for peace? I said, yeah, you can protest for peace, but then you would be arguing for Hamas to surrender and release the hostages. You would be protesting against the Iranian regime. If you want a peace, that's what you should be protesting. You wouldn't be protesting against Israel if you're protesting for peace. So it really is horrible it really is horrible what continues to happen in Iran, what continues to happen in Iran to young people, All right. Again, moral ambiguity and just the inability of the West to take a stand and stick to it and fight. And you remember UNRWA. UNRWA is the United Nations agency responsible for Palestinian refugees. It was set up in 1949 after the War of Independence, Israel's War of Independence, and the so-called Nakba. UN has an agency for refugees, and that agency's primary job as an agency for refugees is to help resettle refugees. That is, when refugees are expelled from a particular area, they don't keep them refugees for 70 years in order to return them to the place where they were expelled. They try to normalize them in some new foreign country. They try to get them settled in somewhere, and that's what the UN refugee agency does. UNRWA is a separate UN refugee agency, only dealing with the Palestinians, and its responsibility is to keep them refugees until, I guess, they can destroy Israel and go back to their so-called homes. The number of refugees has swelled way, way above what were probably actual refugees. It's also true that in no other place in the world are refugees counted third, fourth generation. UNRWA counts refugees as the children of the children of children of people who were expelled from their homes, or who left, in most cases, not expelled, in 90% of the cases, left their homes voluntarily. They're refugees, and their children's and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren are also refugees, which is stunning. UNRWA is also responsible for education of these refugees, both in places like Lebanon, other camps around the world, and also in Gaza and the West Bank. It, as part of its educational responsibilities, it teaches some of the most vile, offensive, horrible anti-Semitic stuff. It teaches in praise of suicide bombers. It is completely co-opted by the jihadists among the Palestinians. Anyway, Israel made the claim that during October 7th, at least 12 UNRWA workers participated in the attack. As a consequence of that, the United States and a bunch of other governments withdrew their support of UNRWA. Germany has just reinstated it because it is claiming that a review commissioned by the United Nations, the United Nations, that objective organization, found that Israel, quote, has yet to provide supporting evidence of this, of UNRWA's members or employees participating in the attack. German officials also emphasized that, quote, UNRWA, the vital and currently irreplaceable role played by UNRWA in meeting the basic needs of people in Gaza. I mean, if needs, you mean undermining their prosperity, undermining their ability to flourish, undermining their freedom, undermining their ability to pursue their lives, then yeah. But UNRWA is a disaster for the Palestinian people. It is destructive to any kind of pro-human cause the Palestinian people might have. All right. All right, those are the, those. Okay, let's do a couple of Supreme Court cases. So yesterday we had the Idaho case with the abortion and hospitals and you know, the stories that came out during the Supreme Court case were pretty horrific in terms of women being helicoptered out of Idaho because Idaho refused to, even though their life potentially was in risk, Idaho refused to do it. Idaho hospitals refused to execute an abortion, so had to be helicoptered out. In spite of all that, it does look like the Supreme Court will rule for Idaho. It does look like the justices do not think that this legal provision about emergency care should justify giving them a carte blanche to do abortions, even if the mother's health is at risk. There's a lot of nuance here. So exactly how I think the Supreme Court comes down on this is yet to be determined. But this is the consequence of banning the right to have an abortion. This is the consequence of leaving it up to the states, as if maybe we should leave murder up to the states. Maybe we should leave maybe we should leave free speech up to the states. Texas could ban it, and you know, we'll see what happens, right? Federalism. The whole idea of rights and a federal government protecting those rights excludes states making their own decisions about things that are related to actual human rights. So the reality is, though, states are making these decisions. I think the Supreme Court, it'll be interesting because it's nuanced, right? Under what circumstances is the mother's life in danger? What is that count? Is it a doctor deciding it? Two doctors deciding it? Is her mental state taken into account? What if without an abortion, her reproductive organs are going to be destroyed? Is that reason enough to justify an abortion, even though her life might not be threatened, the ability to reproduce in the future might be threatened? All of these issues are going to be somebody's going to have to deal with because the law is not clear. State law is not clear. The courts are going to have to come down, and the courts are ultimately going to have to decide the nuances of how to interpret the state laws, abortion restrictions, particularly in places like Idaho, where it's, you know, basically unless the mother's life is in danger or incest, rape, they ban abortion completely. That is a position that is going to be tested in the courts. What exactly is a mother's the mother's life, all of that, to no end. And it's every state because the laws are a mishmash. You can see that's happening in Arizona. Arizona instituted a law that was passed in 1862, I think it was, 1864 maybe, and they completely banned abortion in all cases. And now Arizona legislature is trying to overturn it, but a few Republicans are holding it up. The House in Arizona, finally they found 3 Republican votes to basically overturn the 19th century law. So the 19th century law, the House has overturned it. Now they need a Senate vote. So again, because Republicans have a majority there, some Republicans are going to have to shift to the Democratic side. If they can repeal this law, then a 15-week abortion limit will be instituted in the state of Arizona. But first they have to repeal this law. They're looking for the senators, the Republican senators to flip. Probably happen. Even Carrie Lake, who was super anti-abortion, super anti-abortion, has basically flipped on this because she realizes how many votes she'd lose if she stuck to her anti-abortion stance. Now she supports the 15-week thing. So, you don't have democracy. Rights are not up for the democratic process. Rights are not negotiable. This is what we fought a civil war for, right? You don't get to violate rights even if a majority of the people want it. Okay, second Supreme Court case was argued, it's maybe still being argued in front of the Supreme Court right now. And this is the Supreme Court case about Donald Trump's immunity. This is Trump's appeal to the court to say that both in a number of the cases, the Georgia case, the document case, and the insurrection case, January 6th case, he has presidential immunity, and therefore none of those he should be tried on because he has presidential immunity. The Supreme Court definitely seems skeptical about this. It did seem like the court's position is going to be that on private action not directly related to your job as president, you do have liability. You do not have immunity. Indeed, Trump's own lawyer admitted this, right? So at some point, Justice Barrett asked Trump's lawyer, so you concede that private acts don't get immunity? And Trump's lawyer said, we do, which I think surprised Barrett. And then so Barrett said, quote, Smith is the special counsel, basically indicting Trump. Smith argues us, even if we were to decide or assume that there was some sort of immunity for official acts, that there were sufficient private acts in the indictment for the case to go back and the trial to begin immediately. And I want to know if you agree or disagree about the characterization of these acts. So then she alluded to 3 hypothetical acts, whether they were private or part of the, official action. And then she says, if you agree that these are private, so those acts you would not dispute. Those were private, and you wouldn't raise a claim that they were official. And then Trump's attorney says that he disputes all the allegations, but said that the 3 that she provided wouldn't raise a claim that they were official. Indeed, are considered private acts, which is it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting. So he agreed that some of the provisions that Trump is being indicted for are private acts. He still rejects them as illegal, but they are private acts. So they can proceed. So it doesn't look like he is looking, Trump's lawyer, for complete dismissal of everything, but just a clarification from the Supreme Court about what in the indictment is private and what is not. and therefore what is legit and what is not in terms of the lawsuit. So that is being argued right now in front of the court, or maybe it's ended already, but that will go, we'll hear about that in probably early June. We'll get the decisions. So the court is busy. All right, finally, one other story from the courts, not the U.S. Supreme Court, but this one is from New York, I think the New York Supreme Court or the New York Appellate Court, New York Court of Appeals. And this is a real shocker, I think, for many people. But the New York Court of Appeals today overturned Harvey Weinstein's sex crimes conviction. Now, it didn't overturn it in terms of, you know, they thought that it was the wrong decision. They overturned it because there was testimony that was delivered that they thought was unnecessary and, you know, violated, I guess, his rights in some way. And therefore, he can be retried for the accusations of rape and sexual assault. But but he has been, you know, his I can't remember how many years he was sent to jail, 23 years in jail. That has been overturned. So prosecutors are going to have to decide pretty quickly here whether they are going to retry him. And this is going to be interesting because the prosecutor for this, not the prosecutor who prosecuted him originally, but the prosecutor has to decide now is the Manhattan District Attorney. And the Manhattan District Attorney, of course, is Bragg. So, who is like a crazy leftist. But it would be interesting, who's obviously indicting Trump. But it will be interesting if he chooses to go after Weinstein and in a probably what would be a quite an expensive lawsuit, you know, go after him in an attempt to send him back to jail. I think there's no question that, you know, you know, so the decision is about a lack of due process. But the fact that Harvey Weinstein was a rapist and a bad guy, I hope they retry him. I hope they retry him. I hope he goes back to jail. The guy was a real bastard. All right, let's see. What else did I have here? That's good. Okay, we're going to keep that. Yeah, I think we are good. So, okay, so that is the news roundup for today, April 25th. We'll now take your super chat questions, and then we'll talk about fertility. We'll talk about declining fertility rates, number of children people are having in the United States, hit a record low. It was reported yesterday, and this is, of course, a global phenomena. So the question is why? There's a big debate going on, and why is this happening? What exactly is going on? All right. Oh, thanks for all the super chats. Really appreciate it. We're pretty close to halfway mark for our goal, although today is a little short of a session. But yeah, keep them coming while this is going on. We do have 2 hours. We have plenty of time to talk about fertility and to take as many questions, all of your questions, or at least most of your questions. And so feel free to continue asking the questions. All right. Remo asks an unrelated question, but an interesting one. Remo says, how would you structure the board of directors of a public company to maximize profit for shareholders? So inside versus outside board members, chairman, member, owning shares, etc., you name it. So I think an ideal board, and again, it's hard to say what an ideal board is without really knowing who the CEO is, without knowing how he functions, and because really, an ideal board is a board that supports, oversees, but also strategically supports the CEO and provides him with the kind of guidance, help, assistance that that particular CEO needs. So, different CEOs might need different things, and I think boards should be customized for the CEO, not with his buddies and friends and golf partners, but with people that complement his skill set and that make it possible for him to do the best that he can while, supporting him, but also providing oversight and making sure that he doesn't stray. Some CEOs are very, very strong and, don't need a board that is going to provide them with guidance. They just need oversight. Other boards, you might want them to have oversight as well. Guidance as well as oversight. So it's going to depend on the CEO and what is best for him, and that's why I think it's completely legitimate for CEO to have kind of the board that he wants within limits, right? So how would I structure it? So first of all, I will want every single board member to have what Nassim Taleb has called skin in the game. Every single one of them should be a shareholder. And they shouldn't ideally just be a shareholder because the company grants them shares. They should be a shareholder because they've taken money out of their pocket and bought some shares. And maybe ideally the board of directors says, you should have a certain percentage of your net worth in the shares of this company. You should have real skin in the game. You should be shareholders. Your fate should be 100% tied with the fate of shareholders. You are the shareholders' representative. I think the most disgraceful thing in corporate America today, and a reason why boards are not doing their jobs often, and why in some cases boards are allowing corporations, for example, to go woke, is the fact that so many directors are what are called, quote, outside directors. And a pure outside director has no share, no interest, no knowledge about the company. And that is a useless director. And that is the opposite of what you should have on the board. You should have people who have skin in the game, have shares, and who are knowledgeable about the industry and knowledgeable about the company. Now, a majority of the board members should be outsiders. They should not be reporting to the CEO. I think an overwhelming majority should be outsiders in that sense. But only in that sense. Today, outsider means completely divorced from the company, knows nothing. I think board compensation should be in stock. So I would want really, really, really smart people who are shareholders. And if they weren't shareholders before, they become shareholders once they join the board, with a not insignificant portion of their net worth in the company's stock, with most of them, an overwhelming majority of them, being non-company. So here are the criteria for being an outsider in my book. They're not employees, they're not consultants, they're not family members of the CEO or the management team. So they should be all three. Neither consultants, neither family members, neither not employees. I think that should be the overwhelming majority of directors. In terms of insiders, the CEO should be probably the only employee of the company. If there is a family member of the CEO or of management team who is a big shareholder, they could have a board seat, but again, not a majority, a board seat. In some companies where, I don't know, the COO, Chief Operating Officer, or CFO, Chief Financial Officer, also have a significant role in the company, they could also have a seat on the board. So that is the ideal board of directors. Now, I don't think this should be a law. I don't think this should be regulation. That's not what Remo's asking. Remo's asking about what an ideal board would look like. Should, when you join a board of directors of a publicly traded corporation, should the CEO in recruiting you have knowledge of your net worth? Yeah, absolutely. It's relevant. You don't want to disclose it? You don't have to. But then you're not on my board of a publicly traded corporation. So this would be an ideal board of directors. This is no additional regulations, no additional laws, no additional government involvement. Government should stay completely out of board of directors. This is what the theory, the governance is. And, you know, you know, for decades, this is something we study as academics. What boards of directors are well-functioning, what are not, what types of compensation are good, what are not. And this is how you give advice to CEOs and to board members. And for those who doubt my qualifications for this, you can look up my publications about board governance and much of the research I did as an academic. Much of our investment strategy is built around these kind of issues. Yeah, so this is a completely legitimate area to have a view, an opinion, a strategy around what is the optimal composition of a board of directors. Seems like a legitimate economic question to ask people. So thank you, Remo, for the question. And let's see, chairman, you know, ideally you would separate the chairman from the CEO. But again, I don't think that is always the case. There are cases in which, you know, a CEO is can function as both and do very well. But, you know, certainly a founder who is both the chairman and CEO, I would leave unless there's some reason to separate them. Somebody who's taken the company and built it up as a CEO and chairman, I wouldn't suddenly separate it out. So you have to really think it through. Right? All right. So this is what you should do if you want to maximize shareholder wealth. This is what you should do. Okay, Michael, have you seen some of these large YouTube channels where they ask Israelis and Palestinians about the conflict, and the Palestinians are 100% on board for wiping out the Zionist enemy, whereas Israelis have very wide-ranging opinion? Yeah, I mean, and that's the point. It's that the Palestinians not just have a single opinion, but they also have the most bloody, the most horrific opinion possible. I haven't seen those channels. I've seen these kind of surveys done, and you know, I've known of this kind of you know, opinions. It's kind of obvious. I mean, one group lives under authoritarianism, and another group is in a free society in which they can express their views and vote and disagree and argue and debate. And another group where they're afraid that if they say something that's not acceptable, they might land up being hung from the nearest post. Harper Campbell, the Muslim world is universally primitive. That's absolutely right. I mean, not universally, but mostly primitive. As far as we in the West are from objectivism. The Muslim world is from the Enlightenment. We went through a few hundred years ago. That's mostly right. Again, you don't want to overly generalize because there are people within the Muslim world who are much better. There are countries where things are better. Malaysia and Indonesia are both non-Muslim countries, but they have somewhat functioning democracies and somewhat Western ideas about certain things. They're still problematic. They might be, I don't know, there might be other Muslim majority countries like Albania, which is, or Azerbaijan, which is an authoritarian state, but Western. Albania, which is, again, a somewhat closer to being a liberal democracy. So you have to be careful about what you mean by the Muslim world. Certainly the Muslim world in the Middle East is primitive and about as far from the Enlightenment as the world is today from objectivism. That is not an exaggeration, I don't think. James, even though the poison that's destroying us flows from the universities will organically be phased out. 3-month code academy programs will be the new norm in a few decades. Then what will statists do? I don't think you're right. I think the universities are going to be around for a long time. I also think that the reality is that most of our problems don't come from the computer science department, where people learn how to program and where you need an education in things that allow you to develop things like AI, which I don't think just coding 3 months qualifies you to do. So it's going to be a lot more, you need computer sciences, for example. You need that field. You need that study. And then another thing is the humanities are really, really, really important. Having good humanities departments is truly crucial. It's what makes a culture in the end. So, we can't, if we give up on the humanities, we give up on a culture, we give up on civilization ultimately. So while I'd like to see all the humanities departments, most of them, 90% of them, at the university shut down, but something has to replace them. And people are interested in the humanities, so something will replace them. The question is, what is that something that replaces them? And whether we call it universities or online universities or whatever, it's still going to be important. What is the content on those universities? Maybe it's teaching company-like companies. Maybe it's, Jordan Peterson's academy. But what is the content there? Because that content will shape civilization into the future. It will shape our culture. And as long as these professors, these ideas still dominate, as long as these ideas are the ones that are being taught as humanities, really exclusively as humanities, and dominate the humanities, not just at the universities, but also in these other alternatives, then we've got a problem. We've got a problem. So, the fact that many universities are in trouble does not mitigate the need, the necessity to find alternatives for them. To find out philosophically correct alternatives for them, philosophically better alternatives for them. As long as we tolerate these ideas, these professors, these courses, these classes, we will have the rotten culture that we have. Liam, when you talk about the people who matter, when it comes to changing the culture, you mean exclusively intellectuals and prominent businessmen. The average blue-collar Prager University watcher doesn't matter in the long run. I think that's absolutely right. He doesn't. He will watch what is sexy at that point in time to watch. And right now, maybe it's Prager University, but what is sexy is going to be determined by the intellectuals and by the intellectual businessmen, right? The businessmen who are intellectual. And the numbers will come from that. If you dominate the intellectual high ground, then people will follow you. People will, the numbers follow the intellectuals, not the other way around. The intellectuals don't go where the masses are. The intellectuals shape the masses. Even when it comes to populism, it is ultimately intellectuals that created the environment for populism. And so it's, yes, the people who matter are the few. And the majority adjusts to them. The majority, as opinions are shaped by them. J.J. Jigbees. I learned today that there is still American hostages being held by Hamas. Yes. How does the president not say that Gaza will get no aid until they are released back to the States? How is this not a scandal? Crazy we send aid. Yeah, I mean, but this is altruism in practice. And everything can be negotiated. You can cut a deal. God forbid we declare the hostage takers as evil. Remember, we didn't do anything when hostages were taken by the Iranians in 1979. We continue to do nothing about hostage being taken. We pay them off. We negotiate with them. And then we pretend we don't negotiate with terrorists. But of course you do, all the time. This is the moral bankruptcy of altruism across the entire political spectrum. Everybody wants to cut a deal. There are no principles. There is no right and wrong. There is no good and evil. There's just who's a better deal maker. And how can we let the Palestinian people suffer because of the crimes of their leadership? How can we let the Palestinians suffer because a few people are kidnapped hostages, forgetting the cheering and the celebrating of the Palestinian people when those hostages were brought into Gaza, right? As if the Palestinian people have no responsibility for what their leadership has done. Just bizarre and counterfactual. But this is altruism. This is exactly what you can see altruism play out more in foreign policy, more explicitly in foreign policy than anywhere else. Because in foreign policy, literally, we love our enemy. We turn the other cheek. We don't just love our enemy. I mean, we love our enemy, and therefore we help our enemy. We provide aid to our enemy. No other area in human life or in politics do you see it so explicitly, so real, as you do in foreign policy. And by the way, no other field of people's lives sacrificed the way they are because of foreign policy mistakes, or foreign policy altruism, not a mistake. It's purposeful. Fenn Harper says, it strikes me that if automation, AI, take over production jobs, we could live under replacement rate without it ruining everything. Also, JohnStewert interviewed Lina Khan on his show. It's available here on YouTube. I checked it out on YouTube. Yeah, it's not, I don't know how interesting it really is. I'll look at it again and see, maybe I'll use it in one of the future shows. In terms of automation, AI, yes, I mean, absolutely. I think that is, you need less people. Now, at some point, the population goes to, I guess, it goes to zero. But the assumption there is that birth rates don't change over time, and they stay constant or they keep declining, and there's no evidence to suggest any of that. All right, we've got a bunch of $2 to $10 questions here, so let's jump in on those. Mary Benz, how's your capitalism course prep going? It's going fine. There are not enough hours in the day, or I don't have enough energy for all the hours that are in the day. So I'm behind, but I'm always behind. That's my modus operandi, I guess. I always take on more than I can handle. There's always stuff to do. There's always a million things. I've got tomorrow and the weekend to do a lot of work on it. But basically, the outline is there. I know exactly what I'm going to cover every day. Now I need to fill in some of the details. My main concern with the details are, some of the history. I want to be able to accurately give numbers and things like that. And I'm going to spend kind of 2 days on history of capitalism and history of the alternatives to capitalism for the contrast. So, but I've got, the outline is there. It keeps getting better. I keep having more ideas. I actually had a good idea today. I wrote it down somewhere. I'm also listening to Johan Norberg's Capitalist Manifesto right now. I'm reading books like this by, it's a good book, by Lina Khan, who's written a number of books on capitalism. They just have a lot of data and statistics and stuff like that and cover a lot of issues. He's got one book that just covers all the objections or some of the objections to capitalism and what's the arguments against them. That's really useful. So I'm reading, listening, writing. That's how I prep. And write, get those outlines detailed as I can, and then I trim them back to a usable outline for the actual presentation. So Tuesday morning is when I do the first class, What is Capitalism? Then class 2 and 3 on the history of capitalism and the history of its alternatives. Class 4 and 5 on wait a minute. That's 1, 2, 3. I've got 8. 4 and 5 on the economics of capitalism. That one where I gave you last week. I've completely revamped it, completely changed it. It's much more centralized. It's much more crucial. And it's much more driven by an example. So, that is 4 and 5. So that'll be 2 classes. 4 and 5. 6 is on the economic objections to capitalism. So this will be monopolies and cronyism and stuff like that. 7 is on the philosophical objections to capitalism, altruism, dominantly altruism. But I'll also talk about the fact that capitalism is inconsistent with unreason or any system of unreason. And then 8 is class number 8 is going to be the philosophical defense of capitalism. So egoism and reason is going to be class 8. So that is my 8 classes. But it should be fun. It should be interesting, and I'm looking forward to doing it. The only thing I wish is for it to be more interactive. I wish they had like mics coming in from the ceiling that captured what the students say, and I could make it more Socratic. I like teaching in a Socratic way. One of the reasons I kind of like having a live audience even here and looking at the chat a little bit is I like the back and forth. I'm trying to ignore it because I don't think it makes for good podcasting, and some of the people are just jerks. Jerks are never good students to have. But in a classroom, I would love to be able to ask a question, I'd get answers, feed off of those answers, answer, and move in that direction. We'll see what the layout, what the setup is in the studio, and how possible that is. But that would be my ideal. Jason, a teenager's reading list includes Anthem, Jonathan Livingston's Seagull. Both will be read, but which one should be read first? I do the Seagull first. It's less philosophical. And one of the things when you read Anthem when the teenager reads Anthem, is to highlight the differences and highlight the extent to which Anthem is more philosophical. In what ways? What is it bringing out that Seagull doesn't? And you could do more of that comparison, which I think would be incredibly useful. I only insult the people who are junk to begin with. Enric, I like the current lighting. It highlights the foreground, you, and the background, giving more of a clear 3D view. Thank you. I mean, I have a lighting consultant who has come out and done this. It turns out that one of the listeners to the show, not so much a viewer of it, but a listener to it on the podcast, lives here in Puerto Rico, moved here because of me and Peter Schiff talking about Puerto Rico and the tax advantages. And he lives here, and he's been coming out, he's now been out 3 or 4 times and helping me improve the lighting and so on. So this is probably the way we're going to do the lighting for now. At some point, I might get a better camera and see what happens when you put in a significantly better camera. What'll happen to all of this. So that's maybe in the fall. In the meantime, I'm also going to we're going to work on sound effects. We're going to work on some overlay stuff onto this real estate for marketing purposes, URLs, things like that. We use this space more effectively. That's going to be inlays in OBS. So all of that is coming. He's working for free, so thank you, Craig, again for doing all this, and he will teach me how to do the overlays and how to use. I've got this great sound thing, how to use that to mix a thing to be able to have all kinds of sound effects and things like that. So yeah, I'm looking. We're constantly working here to professionalize the Yaron Brook Show, and that is the goal. Jason, should Google build AI bots that intercept your super chat questions and offer viewers a chance of an AI answer based on your past contents, but for less cost? No, because that'll reduce my income. No, what I'm really hoping in the future is that we will be able to train a Yaron Brook AI bot to be able to take on the super chat and just answer them all. It'll free up my time to do other things. Who knows what the future brings us? But no, I hope Google does not build an AI that sucks away all my income. Enric says, so what to do about the educational system? What to do about the educational system? Start fresh, build alternatives, at every level. So build alternative universities, build alternative online educational platforms, build alternative high schools, primary schools, kindergartens, pre-K schools. You got to replace the existing educational establishment. Do it any way that you can. So University of Austin is a great step. Ayn Rand University, which is not accredited, so it's not exactly replacing the universities, but at least there's an online alternative education. The Yaron Brook Show, good alternative education. Jordan Peterson's thing, we'll see what the quality is, but at least you'll know how good courses on capitalism and on finance. And we need more to get away from the current crop of corrupt intellectuals, corrupt professors, corrupt teachers. It's the only hope. The only hope is to build alternatives. Who was the interview with on GBNEWS? I don't know. It was at 9:45 my time, London time. That would be at 5 hours. So that is 14:45, 2:45 p.m. London time. So whoever it was a man and a woman, both were the hosts. Hopper Campbell, physical bravery is an animal instinct. Moral bravery is much higher and truer courage. I think that's right, but I think the two are related. I think that we lose our animal instincts as we become more conceptual. And as a consequence, we don't have those instincts anymore. So even the physical courage has to come from somewhere. And that physical courage comes from your moral bravery. It comes from your conclusions. It comes from how much you value your life. It comes from your self-esteem. Right? So that is, I don't think there's such a thing as an instinct to physical bravery. Not your average algorithm. What was your best year for Super Chat revenue? It was 2023, and 2024 will be better. At least it's on track to be better. So every year, from a Super Chat perspective, every year has been better. We discovered Super Chat. I discovered Super Chat in 2020 because of one person who started to give big contributions over the Super Chat. I'd never thought about it, never considered it. And then, so 2020 was really the year where Super Chat started, and Super Chat has been better every single year, and this year it's better. It's not growing by huge amounts. For that, we'd have to grow our subscriber base. To really get it to be much bigger than it is. We'd have to grow subscriptions much, but subscriptions are growing. They're growing steadily. They're growing nicely. I think primarily the short videos, the 1-minute videos that we're putting out 2 of those a day. I think those bring a lot of new subscribers. So it's just not growing as fast as I would want. It's not growing kind of at the pace that could get us to 100,000, anytime soon. So that's still the big puzzle. How do we grow subscribers? That is the bottom line. Because subscribers then listen, then they can participate either in Super Chat or monthly contributions. But monthly contributions are very high. This year will be the best year, including if you include sponsorships and everything. And Super Chat this year will be the best year. But that growth is completely dependent on growing subscribers and on whether, how many people out there who are subscribers also, have a decent net worth, who can afford to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars a month on the Yaron Brook Show. That is also a limiting factor, is how much the subscribers, how wealthy they are, right? If I just get college students, more subscribers will not affect more income. Not your average algorithm. At any point in your career, did you ever see yourself becoming a deca or centi millionaire? A deca millionaire, definitely. So I definitely thought at some point in my career that I would become a deca millionaire. That is more than 10 million. That has not panned out, and now I still think I might break into that, but not as easily, right? But I never thought of and never strove to be a centi, but a deca definitely. I wanted that. It didn't pan out because the markets have not, the force be with you, they say in Star Wars. Well, the markets have not been with me the last couple of years. So there you go. Anonymous Doe, what are your thoughts on business activism where they refuse to do business with people they politically disagree with, debanking the Trump guy? I mean, I think that's fine. I have no problem with that. If it's a private business. I think once you get into being a public corporation, that is with shareholders, then it's a problem. And to the extent that you do that, I think it's completely legitimate for shareholders to come back and to you and say, well, wait a minute. It's not what we want you to do. You're managing to maximize our wealth. Your fiduciary duty is that. So forget about, your politics. You've got to maximize our wealth. If it's your own company, you can do business with whoever you want. If it's a shareholder company, your fiduciary duty is to maximize the wealth of shareholders, not your own. right? All right. Oh, Miroslav has found the link. Miroslav found the link. There I am. Cool. Thank you, Miroslav. I'm gonna post this on my YouTube channel. It looks like looking at the summary that they post underneath it, didn't really post a summary of what I said, right? At least not that I can see. All right. Anyway, thank you, Miroslav. That is great. Oh, wow, look at that. You know, it's making headlines in all supporting evil. U.S. Gaza protesters blasted over blatant anti-Semitism should be judged accordingly. All right, that's good. See, this is how you get the word out. They quote me as saying, anti-Semitism is not coming from nowhere. This is a consequence of what these students are being taught. This is a consequence of a curriculum throughout the country which demonizes success, demonizes the West, demonizes liberal democracies, and holds up an example of the worst kind of barbarism, which is Hamas. All right, that's pretty good. These protesters are a manifestation of what they're being taught in the classroom. All right, the stuff the professors are teaching on a daily basis. All right, that should get people stuff and feathers a little bit. That is good. All right. Oh, wow, it's going long. That's good. Mary Elaine, businesses have a right to refuse to do business with anyone for any reason, even though the law often doesn't recognize that right. They do, except, you know, who is the business? And if the manager is representing shareholders, he has to act in their fiduciary, as a fiduciary of theirs. And if he's not acting as their fiduciary, they can sue him. So if he is acting from a perspective that the shareholders view as not in their best interest, then they can sue him and replace him. Can you talk about the Haifa Oil Refinery Massacre? Oh, God. Now you're asking me to remember this. I don't remember the details, but there was an attack against, this is in 1948, before Declaration of Independence under the British. There was an attack on Jewish workers there, and in response, certain members of the Jewish militia killed a bunch of Arabs who worked in the refinery. In retaliation, it was roundly condemned by the leadership of what became Israel later on. But it was a retaliation against an attack on civilians. They attacked civilians. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying those things didn't happen. I wouldn't call it a massacre. It was more closely to a retaliation against civilians, appropriate or not appropriate, but a retaliation against civilians. Alex Lovering. Oh, I've decided to retire JJ Jigsby's as my YouTube handle and use my real name. I'll be using this account from here on. Hello, world. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it, and we'll miss JJ Jigsby's. Mary Elaine, assuming all government dollars were out of education, what is a good plan for an educational renaissance? Wouldn't it have to be letting the market work? Yes, I mean, private education, let it happen, let it rip, let competition arise, let people start investing capital in it. let people, compete with different products in the marketplace of education. I mean, that is the solution even with government involvement. That is, education saving accounts basically allow the government to continue funding education, but out of the curriculum, out of management, out of all aspects of education, except the funding of it. And that's why I love education saving accounts, and they allow for actual competition, experimentation with regard to education. Let's see which schools work, which schools don't. Let parents make those choices, not bureaucrats. So education saving account is a step in that direction, a step in creating a market in education. All right. Let's see. All right. Let's talk about, thank you to all the super chatters, and feel free to continue asking questions, and I'll calibrate it. We have to stop at 4, but I'll calibrate it towards achieving that. All right, so I had this story. One second. Yes. So reports today have it that the United States has achieved the lowest birth rate in number of babies born, in a sense, per 100,000. In as long as history's been recording these kind of numbers in the United States. And this is for 2023. Last year, it was an official end to the uptick in new babies that began during COVID-19. COVID-19, it turns out, people got pregnant. I guess they were stuck home and they had sex, and they made babies. But at least 3.591 thousand babies, 3.591 million babies were born in the United States in 2023, down 2% from 2022. And it's consistent with the annual decline that started before the pandemic of about 2% fewer babies a year. Birth rate, fertility, is now below replacement. So last year's total of new births adds up to a total of 1,616 births per 1,000 women in the U.S. This is the figure that's called total fertility rate. And this is a rate well below what's called replacement rate. Replacement rate is 2,100, right? 2,100 births for every 1,000 women out there. So 2.1 children per woman. As a consequence, independent of immigration, the United States would be shrinking right now. As deaths exceed births and the population starts shrinking, you're seeing that happening significantly in places like Japan and in a place like South Korea, where birth rates are so low and the population is so old, the population is shrinking, and actually shrinking pretty fast. Same thing is happening in China, where the population, again, is shrinking, and where they have more deaths than births in every year. Again, these are countries, China, Japan, and South Korea, with really no immigration, although Japan is trying to change that and trying to open up a little bit and increase immigration. This is a culture and a country with a very closed mindset in terms of allowing foreigners in, but they have no choice. And at this point, in order to sustain standard of living, in order to sustain enough people working to be able to pay all the benefits that the government has promised old people, they need to have immigrants, and they know that. So work visas for immigrants are dramatically on the uptick in Japan. Even teen births, which are always viewed as a horrible negative, they have declined dramatically. although they have flattened in recent years, but throughout the 2000s, they were basically declining, so that today there are very few births. So for every 1,000 female teens age 15 to 19, there are 13 births reported, way down from its peak, 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago or so. From 2007 to 2022, the rate of teen births declined by 7% on average. So conservatives should be very happy with that. Anyway, so you're seeing these trends. Europe is declining. While Africa still is well above replacement, births per 1,000 in Africa are in decline. They're well above replacement. They're well above 2.1, but they're way below what they were just 20, 30 years ago. And that is true in Africa. That is true in the Middle East. That is true in the Arab world. The Arab world used to have very high birth rates. Those rates have declined significantly. Asia used to have very high birth rates. Those have declined. And there is one just obvious correlation that is about as close to perfectly correlated as you will find in the social sciences. And that is a very high correlation between wealth per capita, that is individual wealth, individual prosperity, individual disposable income, and birth rates. The more money people make, the more wealth people have, the less babies they have, the fewer children they have. And that is true in Africa. If you look at countries where the population is doing pretty well, their economies have grown, and people are fairly wealthy, birth rates are plummeted. If you look at countries in Africa that remain poor, where wealth has not increased, they have very high birth rates. So birth rates, to a large extent, are correlated with wealth. The richer you are, the fewer kids you have. Now, a lot of people are going to argue that the real issue today, why we're seeing birth rates continue to decline, particularly seeing a massive continuing decline in rich countries, is because it's too expensive to raise kids. People want to have more kids, but it's just too expensive. The reality is that there is really no empirical evidence to show that this is true. It's actually much cheaper to raise kids today than it was 40 years ago. You know, maybe it's not if you want to keep a very, very high standard of living. But if you want the standard of living people had 40 years ago, it's cheaper today to have that standard of living than it was 40 years ago, even with kids. It's not cost. People are significantly wealthier today, including the working class, including the middle class. It's not an issue of cost. I mean, I had both my kids. When I was a PhD student. I was making what, $15,000, $16,000 a year. I got some help from my father-in-law. So maybe if you include that help, maybe I made it to $20,000 a year, maybe. No saving, nothing, right? Basically spent every dollar that came in. And, you know, we survived. I sent my eldest son, you know, in those years to a Montessori school. I can't tell you what it cost, but it was expensive. And we survived. And then when I got my first job, I got a decent job, paid, I don't know, $63,000 a year, I think, my first job. I thought I was a millionaire. I'd never had that much money in my life. I didn't I thought I could do all kinds of things. Discovered very quickly, it goes. But my kids never went wanting. So no, I don't think it's. And I stopped at 2, not because it was too expensive. Never even came up. Was never a consideration. My wife and I originally thought of 3 or 4, but once we had 2, it was just too much work. A third one was just inconceivable. We both wanted to have a life, and it was just so much work. We had other things we wanted to do in life, other priorities we wanted to have. And this is the bottom line, is people are not having kids because they'd rather do other stuff. They have other values. They might have career values. They might have, mainly career values, particularly women. Women who used to have nothing else to do but raise a family. Yeah, so family is 3, 4, 5. What difference does it make? This is all they do. They never had options. Women suddenly have options, which is fantastic for women. And they're making choices. They're making choices to have a career first and then have babies later in life. And maybe because it's later in life, they can only have so many because, once you get into the 40s, it's risky. And maybe because they've already had a career, now they're having kids, they still want to do the career as well. They want to have it both. So more than 1 or 2 is just overwhelming. The fact that fertility rates are so low is a sign of positive evolution, positive progress towards greater choices, more values, more options, more things to do in life. And many people are choosing that. Now, will they always choose that? I don't know. Maybe as AI comes in and more of work gets done by AI, maybe people will choose to stay home more, and maybe there'll be more leisure time, and maybe there'll be more time for kids, and maybe they'll choose to have more kids. So it is, it is fantastic that people now have choices. And we're seeing the choices that they make. They are indicating what they prefer, at least for now. Women and young families prefer to have fewer kids because they have so many other options they would rather engage in. And why does anybody care? I mean, there are economic considerations, but that's only because we live in statist governments, and it's only because we deny ourselves the benefits of immigration. But do we owe future generations to continue the human race by having above 2.1 kids? No, we don't. We don't. All we owe is our own lives. And we owe it to our kids, the ones we have, to be as happy as we can, as well-adjusted as we can, as passionate as we can about living, because that will reflect in them. So I don't think you owe future generations. And, you want to have a lot of kids, then have a lot of kids because you enjoy having a lot of kids, which is completely legitimate. But some people don't, and more people have options today to make those choices than they have in the past. Now, this also corresponds to another, other social phenomena, which is, I think the one, I don't have proof on this, I can't show this empirically, this is just me speculating, if you will, that cultures that are pessimistic, cultures that don't believe in the future, that are worried of future, they're more worried about the future, those cultures are not going to have kids because kids are an embodiment of a belief in the future. So I think how many kids we have, at least in aggregate, in some way, reflects the general sense in the culture of optimism and pessimism. And I think we live in a place today where people are very pessimistic about the future. We're all going to burn from climate change. We're all going to be unemployed because of AI, probably dead because of AI. Why bring children into the world where things are so bad? Right? And so I do think pessimism has something to do with this. Pessimism could be another reason why people are having so much less sex than they used to have, right? There's survey after survey after survey showing that people in the West are having significantly less sex than they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. And this is every age group, not just young people, but through every age group. When you're a little bit more depressed, when you're pessimistic, when you're uninspired, you have less sex. So all of these are, in a sense, philosophical problems about the future, about belief in yourself, about self-esteem, about belief as a consequence of self-esteem in the ability of humanity to overcome. Yeah, Jennifer, even married people supposedly having less sex. Every age group, every category. Even gays, supposedly, who, you know, who the mythology at least was very sexually active, less sex. Again, at every age group. I think this is an expression of that depression. And that is a consequence of this apocalyptic nature of our intellectuals, the apocalyptic nature of what is going on. There was a big New York Times story, I don't know, this weekend, early this week, about married couples not having sex or barely having sex at all, and being okay with it. Bizarre. So I just think people like other stuff. They have more options. They have more values to engage with, particularly women. They have more choices, and they're choosing other stuff. Doesn't mean this will be true in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And I think people generally are less optimistic about the future than certainly they were in the 19th century, or even coming out of World War II. I think people after World War II were very optimistic, were very positive. So it's a combination of something positive and something negative. A lot of these phenomena are not just one simplistic thing, right? There's a multiple effects going on, multiple things going on, and they have multiple impacts on it. There's certainly something to celebrate, more options, again, particularly for women, and something to worry about. It's a culture that is more depressed, more negative, more pessimistic about the future. And I think it's that combination of things. You know, I've mentioned in the past that in Israel, even the secular Israelis, at least pre-October 7th, had above replacement, which is surprising. But not when you think about Israel, particularly over the last 20 years, being a place that's very optimistic. Because they've come out of poverty, they've come out of socialism. It's startup nation, and it looked like for a while they didn't have to worry about people murdering and slaughtering them. But it'll be interesting to see post October 7th that attitude sustains, or whether you see a change in birth rates as a consequence of realizing how precarious the future is. Religious people continue to have lots of babies. That's the one exception. Utah, the state of Utah has definitely a positive birth rate, above replacement. So that is part of the reality. All right. Let's see. Just wanted to talk about that. Andrew has one question. You guys can still ask questions, so feel free to do so. I'm not sure what happened here. Why is this not tracking anymore? 1 second. I'll get to Andrew's question. Rand highlights in What is Capitalism how capitalism enshrines in property rights a right to disagree. As long as rights are respected, capitalism allows people to choose their own way and succeed or fail accordingly. I think that's absolutely right. And capitalism, the essential characteristic of capitalism is voluntary engagement. You get to decide. It's about consent. It's about following your own path. And, you know, if it's a bad path, if it's irrational, or if you're just unlucky, you will fail. And then it's up to you to figure out why you failed, what caused the failure. But it is fundamentally about the right to walk away, the right to disagree, the right to engage with who you want to engage and not engage with others. And if you think about capitalism as essentially, if you think about capitalism as essentially about cooperation, not about competition, but primarily essentially about cooperation, then you have the right to cooperate with who you want to and not to cooperate with who you don't want to. And that is freedom. That's what freedom means. And that's why essentially capitalism is freedom. It's the institutionalization of freedom. All right, here's the deal. We have two sponsors. The Iranian Institute is a sponsor. And I will be providing you in the days to come with a code that will give you a 10% discount on attending OCON. You can either take the 10% discount or you can attend the gala for free. Now, I'm not sure how this is going to apply for people who already signed up to OCON. I'll find out for you, and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking that. But anybody who's not signed up yet for OCON, you will have an opportunity to sign up at a 10% discount. So what I want, I don't have the code yet, but I will have it in the next few days. What I want you to do is really think about, do you want to, and get ready and think about planning travel and all of that, so you can attend OCON and you will get a discount for listening to the Yaron Brook Show. There will be a special code for Yaron Brook Show listeners. OCON is going to be in Anaheim, California, right across the street from Disneyland. So bring the kids. So yes, I'm hoping that we get a lot of Yaron Brook Show people at OCON. We will definitely do a meetup type thing. I'll do a show live from OCON, and you'll all be invited and sit in a room, and we can do the show and we can chat. Of course, you can talk to me anytime during OCON. I'm available. So there will be a code from our sponsor, the Iranian Institute, for you to be able to register for OCON at a small but significant 10% discount. Also, Alex Epstein is a sponsor of the Yaron Brook Show. You can subscribe to alexepstein.substack.com. alexepstein.substack.com. You can subscribe to his energy talking points. And if you want a premium subscription, you can get a premium subscription where you can get access to Alex AI, which is an artificial intelligence app that basically answers questions about energy, environmentalism, and what? What am I missing? Energy, environmentalism, and climate change, as if Alex was answering your question live right there in front of you. So alexepstein.substack.com, please do that. Please go sign up. That'll show Alex that people who listen to this show also engage with his content. They're coming from here to there, and that will sustain him as a sponsor, which is good, because the more sponsors I get. By the way, I'm always looking for sponsors. If you've got a product, a service, or something you would like me to advertise on this show, and you would like to pay me to do that, write me at Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com. Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com. I am one of the things we're going to do in the next 6 months is really try to ramp up sponsorship. We're also going to have swag. We're going to be selling T-shirts, mugs, things like that on the Yaron Brook Show as well. Anything to generate more revenue so I can basically live off of this show and my public speaking. Again, thank you for all of you. You make the show possible. This show is possible only because of contributions from listeners like you, whether it's here on a live chat or whether it's through a monthly contribution on Patreon. Patreon is great, easy to set up. Please join. Or on YaronBrookShow.com/membership. Membership. Jennifer says she wants a shirt. Soon there will be a URL where you can go buy the shirts, Yaron Brook Show logo on them. We'll have some maybe book covers, maybe some Yaron Brook gem one line, short sentences, sound bites. We'll see what we can come up with. If you have ideas of things that you would like to see on a T-shirt, write to me, Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com. All right, guys, I will see you all tomorrow, 2 p.m. for another show. It's now easy. It's always at the same time. Not always. Mostly at the same time. Every day. Talk to you soon. Bye.